Hello, Kris speaking. Green Sabre, Doom Telly time, episode 72. And the year is 1990. But before we get into all that shite, brief update. I'm very brief because there's not really much to update. Where shall I start? Let's start with GODTHRYMM. Yeah, all good. Plotting some more gigs coming soonish. Anyway, watch this space. We'll have some announcement in the next few weeks, I imagine, with regards gigs. And writing has begun in earnest for the next album. So, yeah, all very good, very exciting. Can't wait for that. So that's the GODTHRYMM update. Green Sabre. I can't remember it because there's a big gap between these videos that I do. Did I mention that we've rehearsed finally in the new space? I feel like I did anyway, but we have. Yeah, all good. So we've got another rehearsal coming up. And yeah, the weeks are flying past and we loom ever nearer to our next gig, which is the 7th of December. Saturday, 7th December at Night Train in Bradford. Which I can't wait for. And we maybe have a couple of surprises for that gig as well. So get yourself to it, is what I'm saying. Yeah, 7th of December, support to Gods of Hellfire. There's a horse called War, and I've forgotten the other band again. I really should research, but anyway, it's going to be fucking magnificent. So, yeah, yeah, some great bands on there. Can't wait for it. So that's the Green Sabre update. CROWSBLOOD, we've been rehearsing pretty regularly now, really, getting the vocals down, and last week felt really as if I sort of were in a space now where we could probably quite honestly gig now, if I'm being honest. But let's not get too excitable. Like I say, we're still working on writing for the forthcoming album. So yeah, all good. So those are your band updates. So 1990, today's video, yeah, is my continuation of my decade of metal. So essentially, if you've not seen the other videos yet, I'm starting in 1987, where this idea came from Metal Mickey, by the way, who you really should watch his videos. Fantastic on this. And he did like the 80s, a decade of metal. So I kind of picked up on that, and I've just maybe made a slight tweak where my metal life began in 1987 really properly, as I've explained on the other videos. That's when I started really truly getting into hard rock and metal and stuff. So I've decided to start from 1987. So 87, 88, 89, 90, which is today's 91, 92. And I think I'm going right the way through. It's probably 11 videos. I'm going to go right the way through to 1997, where I give up at that point, because really it was fucking slim pickings, quite frankly, was the metal world at that point. But yeah, so I'm doing my own decade of metal. So now we're on to 1990. Now, if you've seen the last video that I did on this, 1989, you'll realise that they've become a fucking struggle at this point to get to just fill in the blanks again. Metal Mickey, who did these videos, what he did was a top 6 of each year with a glaring omission, and I've tried to sort of stick fairly faithfully to that. So I do my top 6, I do my glaring omission, but I also like to sort of make a list of honourable mentions, also rans, and ones that were mighty close to getting into your top 6. For certain years, it's really fucking hard to get a top 6, quite frankly. And 89 in particular, I really struggled. Now, I did say on that last video that there will be countless albums that I've forgotten, and there fucking was. I can't believe that I forgot to mention, so I've made a list of them. Nuclear Assault, Handle with Care. Absolutely stunning record, and Nuclear Assault's finest hour for me, personally. I think it's a cracking album, if you ignore Funky Noise, or whatever it's fucking called. It was around that era that thrash bands were all going funky, and they had some kind of fucking collective aneurysm. I don't know what was going on with it, but yeah, so Handle with Care, I forgot to mention. I should have that none of these that I'm going to mention would have made my top 6. They were all honourable mentions, but I'm fucking annoyed that I missed some absolute classics, and Handle with Care was one of them. Another one, Sabbath's Dreamweaver. Can't believe I fucking forgot that was 89, so yeah, glaring omission again. Like I say, none of these would have made my top 6, but also very close. Dark Angel, close, but no cigar. Mordred, I mean, we talk about the funk thrash thing back then. Mordred were great at doing it. And the Fool's Game album that I'm thinking of from from 89 was a cracker. But I don't understand why all the thrash bands sort of decided that they wanted to get on, and the less said about that fucking 31 flavours or whatever it's called on Sacred Reic's album, the better. They should have been imprisoned for that fucking crime against humanity. Morgoth CP 89, forgot to mention that. Candlemass's album, Death Doom Metalhead, shout out Liam, he mentioned it on one of his recent videos, but yeah, forgot to mention Candlemass. And Atheist, now the reason for Atheist, Piece of Time, the album that I'm thinking of, the reason for forgetting that is it was going to be my honourable mentions in 1990, because I had it in my head that it's a 1990 record. But apparently it's 89 when I checked it. I still feel like it was 1990. But anyway, so I'm going to just sort of mention it here. So, yeah. So, yeah, the point that I'm fucking long-windedly getting to is 89, 90, this video I'm doing, 91, 92 really to a degree. There is so much quality that came out around that time that it is increasingly difficult to get a top 6 that people aren't going to argue to death over. But hey, maybe that's the idea of these videos, so that we can all have healthy discussions about what we like or don't like. But anyway, so yeah, that was just a roundup of 89. 1990. So let's stop fucking waffling, Kris. As per, let's get into my top 6. And my top 6 for 1990. Now, the one that's coming in at number 6, I debated one of 2 classic Big Four thrash albums from this year that was going to make my top, and I felt weirdly, I feel like the other one that's gone into the honourable mentions, I feel like was probably a little more consistent song-wise, that I think it's sort of all killer, whereas on this one I'm going to show, I think there's a bit of filler on it for me personally, only a tiny bit, but the quality songs on this are better than the quality songs on the other. Anyway, fucking, my number 6 from 1990 is this. Slayer's Seasons in the Abyss. For a lot of people and some of my friends, Slayer's best record. I've never felt that. I feel that South of Heaven is stronger than this. I feel that Raining Blood is stronger than this. But don't get me wrong, this is a magnificent album, and what a fucking opener with War Ensemble. It then goes into one of my other favourites off of this album, Blood Red. I think that's brilliant. And then you've got, what's it called? Spirit in Black at number 3. Where 1, 2, 3, one after another. And at that point, it is firing on all cylinders. I feel it drops off a cliff with the next track, personally. Expendable Youth. I don't like it. And that fucking... really annoys me. Always irked me and annoys me still. I don't know why. I just don't like that fucking riff. I find it just sort of lazy for Slayer. It feels like they're sort of thinking, hey, let's write a Hell Awaits type riff. And yeah, anyway, I don't like that song. Dead Skin Mask, though, is a absolutely fucking stellar way to close out the A-side. B-side, Hollow Point, great tune. Skeletons of Society, all right, not too bad. Temptation, all right, not too bad. But it's then again that I just think we're on the verge of filler with those. But then Born of Fire and Seasons ends on an absolute ripper. Do not get me wrong, this is a classic record and a fucking work of brilliance. It is. I just feel there's a tiny bit of filler for me. Whereas Raining Blood, I'll listen to the whole thing. South of Heaven, even though there's technically a bit of filler on that, I will listen to the whole thing. This, I feel I want to skip the odd track here and there. So that is why Seasons is my number 6. Now, some of my honourable mentions I probably think are more consistent, but I just felt that had to get in my top 6, quite honestly. My number 5 for 1990, and comfortably, and I don't care what anyone says, comfortably, this band's best album, bar fuck all. It is Obituary's sophomore, second album, Cause of Death. This is absolutely magnificent. And I've often mentioned that I feel that Obituary are kind of death metal by numbers, and it's all a little too simple for my taste. Now, don't get me wrong, classic death metal should be fairly simple in its makeup. And I think they do it brilliantly. What I like about this is several things. All the songs are just great. I feel like there are a lot of Obituary albums that are mainly filler for me. Certainly moving on after the one that come after this, The Incomplete and so on. Slow Louis Rot is their second best album and brilliant. And I mentioned that in the 89 video. But this one is just faultless. But the reason that it's faultless for me is this chap. James Murphy. He makes Obituary a top-tier death metal band on this album. It is his guitar solos that personally tip this album over the edge from being a brilliant death metal record to being one of the greatest death metal records of all time. His solos make it. They just give them that edge. And his solos are magnificent on every fucking song. I mean, his solos are magnificent on everything that he fucking plays on, quite frankly. And he turns up again later on in my list for 1990. But it's James Murphy that makes this record for me. I do have a bit of a problem with Obituary, that I think they're overly samey. I didn't like that album from last year that come out, with that fucking terrible The Wrong Time on it, or whatever it is. I didn't like it. I just think it's sort of tired. I don't quite like where John Tardy's gone with his vocals. I think they've become slightly parody-esque. They are still a very good band, don't get me wrong. I've done some sensational stuff, but they've done fuck all as good as this before or since. My number 5 for 1990, Obituary's Cause of Death, and let that be the end of discussions. My number 4, probably, it's really close with an album by Dismember, but this one may still be my most favourite HM2 record. And kind of, I suppose, I mean, Carnage, was that where it all started? Anyway, I feel like this might sort of, but anyway, around that time. Entombed's Left Hand Path. Oh, the artwork as well. Sensational. What a record. I've debated long and hard whether... Clandestine, the album that followed this. I like a lot. I think musically, some of the songs might have some catchier, fuller riffs in them. What spoils Clandestine for me, and I've mentioned it on a previous video, is the vocals. And mainly it's Nick A. Anderson that is at fault with that one. I hate his fucking gruff growls on that. They're all, like I say, it's almost like pirate death metal. There's lots of "arr" and "rrr," and it sounds shit to me. You've got Lars, Goran Petrov on this album, though. And they should have just bitten the bullet and kept him for Clandestine, because it would have sounded loads fucking better for it. Which is why this album is their best still for me. Left Hand Path, what a debut, what an album. HM2 at its finest. Fucking faultless record. My number 5, Entombed, Left Hand Path. Right, let me just make sure. Sorry, my number 4, even want it. That's my number 4. Fucking, I can't count to 6, guys. Seasons. Cause of Death, Left Hand Path, yeah. My number 4. My number 3, and I loved the early incarnation of this band. The classic lineup is unrivaled. Pretty much everything that followed it is fairly fucking terrible, apart from one album and the odd song here and there. My number 3 for 1990 is Danzig's follow-up album, Danzig 2, Lucifuge. It is so hard for me to decide whether this is my favourite Danzig record or whether the classic 1988 debut, self-titled, is my favourite Danzig record. They're both amazing and they're both brilliant. But this, I think what I love about this is the production's slightly heavier. And I would say the only thing that detracts from Danzig 1 being a faultless record is the productions on it. It's just slightly lacking in places. It feels like it doesn't quite have that oomph where you want it. This does, and there is some absolute fucking... I mean, opening up Long Way Back from Hell, Snakes of Christ. Is it Killer Wolf then? I want to say Killer Wolf. I forgot to put my tinted respectables on. Killer Wolf, yeah. Tired of Being Alive. It's the closing track on side A that's my favourite. Her Black Wings, fucking magnificent. Then on side B, you've got Devil's Plaything, 777, Blood and Tears, which is his little kind of Roy Orbison sort of moment that he has on this record. Girl, Pain in the World, absolutely fucking faultless. And then you got the bluesy track that I forgot to mention on side A, which is I'm the One. Absolutely faultless record and a worthy number 3. Would have been higher had it not been for the absolutely unrivaled quality of my top 2. But my number 3, classic Danzig, when he could sing, when he was firing with the classic lineup of Christ, Biscuits, Von. Just fabulous. So my number 3 for 1990, Danzig 2, Lucifuge. My number 2, and it was so close to being my number 1, but I had to be honest about it and think what album, for me personally, had a bigger effect on me. And that's why this just got nudged into number 2. Shout out Lee Baines, who will crucify me for putting this anything other than number 1. But it is Trouble's self-titled. Now, technically, their debut was originally self-titled, wasn't it? Am I right in thinking it was only called Psalm 9 on after the event or something? But Trouble's 1990 self-titled record, Trouble. I mean, there aren't enough superlatives for this record, quite frankly. And what it did for doom metal, not revive it as such, because it was always there. It had never gone. But it was this and the track Psychotic Reaction that got Trouble on my... Well, actually, it's sort of a bit of a lie. It was Trouble's Manic Frustration album, and in particular Memory's Garden, which is one of the greatest songs ever written, that got Trouble on my radar. I was like, whoa, who are these? I then heard Psychotic Reaction, which I loved, but couldn't quite get around the overuse of cowbell in the chorus, but since learned to love it and learned to love everything off of this fucking record. I mean... What have you got? At the End of My Days, The Wolf, Psychotic Reaction, of course. Sinner's Flame, Misery Shows, Act 2. R.I.P. Black Shapes of Doom. I'd forgotten the name of that fucking song. Heaven on My Mind, END, End, and All Is Forgiven. All killer, no filler, an absolutely fucking stunning record. And a classic of the era. This will be one that's remembered for centuries. Quite honestly, it has had that much of an effect on the metal world. And a worthy number 2, so close to my number 1, but it isn't. Can you guess what is though, kids? Well, I'm about to tell you. I think some of you have probably already guessed it. But my favourite album from 1990, and one that I consistently go back to, one that is still, yes, my favourite of this band's discography. I just fucking love it. There'll be some of you like, how can this be your favourite of this band? It is. Deal with it. And I'm about to explain why. Death's third album, Spiritual Healing. I mean, absolutely fucking stunning. I love everything about this record. The one thing that I'm maybe not quite so keen on, the album cover. Ed Repka's done some sensational artwork in his times. But I also think, from a personal perspective, he's done some duds. And this always felt like a bit of a dud. I know that it is telling the story of the title track and it perfectly encapsulates that as stuff. I just think, I mean, some at Faces, I mean, what's all that about? And like, someone dressed as me nan on the front cover and stuff. I was struggling with one of my favourite records of all time, having my nan on the cover of it. It's hard work. It's difficult, which is why I never bought a Spiritual Healing t-shirt. Maybe I should. But anyway, I've wandered off topic as per fucking usual. Death, Spiritual Healing is their finest hour for me. And don't get me wrong, their entire back catalogue is fabulous. This is just the best one for me. I've explained on various other videos, like when I did my Death ranking and various others, that I feel like this hits that perfect middle ground of the technical wizardry that followed this from Human onwards into individual thought patterns, symbolic, sound of perseverance. The technical chops that Death went on to from the album before this, Leprosy and Scream Bloody Gore, that were all straight up death metal classics, both of them. No fucking question about that. This sits right in the middle, and it sits brilliantly. It's that cusp of where you can hear more technicality coming into it, but it's still got that punch of classic death metal about it, particularly in the guitar tone on this. Love the guitar tone on it. Like that opening riff to Alter in the Future. Track 2, yeah. That, I just think it's fucking... The razor fucking guitar attack of the opening tune, Living Monstrosity. Then you've got more of a classic old school death vibe in Defensive Personalities. Then one of the best tracks they've ever done, Within the Mind, finishing side A. Title track, opening side B, Spiritual Healing. Low Life, Genetic Reconstruction, Killing Spree. Fucking magnificent. Unrivaled record. Death's Finest Hour, 1990s Finest Hour. Like I say, it's still as relevant today as it was back then. I mean, I'm trying not to get overexcited about this record, but every time I want to talk about it, it's like, for anyone that kind of thinks that this was a misfire, it's like, you're wrong, but go back, listen to it again, try harder. The other reason, and as I mentioned on the Obituary record before, it's got your man James Murphy on it. Now, he wasn't in Death long. I get the impression that James was quite difficult to work with. That might be a total misnomer. Apologies, James Murphy, if I've said anything out of turn. But we all know how difficult Chuck was to work with, and I think there was a sort of element of that with it. But yeah, James Murphy wasn't in them long. I wish he'd been in them longer, because his solos on this are, like his solos on Cause of Death, are mesmerising. I wish I could play a fraction as good as James Murphy can. Honestly, fucking fabulous. And that's why this is my #1 record. Now, we're over 20 minutes already, and I've got lots of honourable mentions to get through. So let's just fucking fire through them, shall we? The album that nearly made my top 6, but didn't quite. Rust in Peace. Not Megadeth's Finest Hour for me, as near as fucking damn it, though. I mean, Megadeth were kind of unrivaled around that Peace Sells, So Far So Good So What, Rust in Peace era. I think all 3 of them albums are virtually without fault, and this is another one. It's fucking fantastic. Marty Friedman's solos are out of this world. But it didn't quite. It was the closest, but it didn't quite make my top 6, sadly. So Megadeth's Rust in Peace. This iconic classic piece of magnificence. Nocturnus is the key. Did I like it at first? Fuck no. It sounded like someone had just put sort of cheesy 1950s sci-fi keyboards over some average death metal. How wrong I was. The more I listened to it, the more it sank in. And this is one of the original old, I don't know if you remember the old Earache splatter vinyls that essentially all just came out a bit pink. Like white vinyl with red splatter on them. This is one that came out a bit pink. But yeah, didn't like this album at first, have grown to fucking love it. It is a kind of sci-fi death metal masterpiece. Nocturnus is the key. Good, but not great. This, my favourite album by Living Colour, hit and miss discography, I will add, and not everyone's taste. But I love this record. Time's Up, by the way, their second one. Some classics on here. Type, and the title track, Time's Up. Amongst others, Lover Is, It's Ugly Head, and so on and so forth. Like I say, not everyone's cup of tea, but I fucking loved this album at the time. And still do now. I can still go back to it. B-side tails off a little compared to the A-side, but still a decent record. And an honourable mention, I have to say. Might possibly be my favourite album by this band if I had to choose one. It's between this and the one that followed it, Sound of White Noise. Yeah, let's argue about that later on. Among the Living's brilliant, by the way, and a very, very close sort of second/third. But yeah, I fucking love this record. I think the guitar tone's brilliant. There's some really chunky riffage. It sounds more mature for Anthrax. It feels like you've kind of, I mean, you've got like the starry sort of cover on there. You've lost the Daft Skater look that they were fucking insistent on in the mid to late 80s. Far more sensible. And Joey Belladonna sort of coming into his own vocally on this one. And then they fucking ditched him. Yeah, you can hear the evolution of Anthrax, and I like it. I think there's some fucking great tunes on here. So, Persistence of Time, cracking album. Alice in Chains debut. Brilliant. It is not a patch on dirt. Let's just get that out there. It isn't, and I won't be told otherwise. There's some great stuff on here. There's a little bit of cock rock creeps into it, and that's why dirt's better for me. It's more composed, accomplished. They're not and never were a grunge band. They were just a fucking child of that time, sadly, and got lumped into it. They were a hard rock metal band. Let's also just get that out there. But this is a stunning debut. Some brilliant tracks on here. Love, Hate, Love. And, of course, the two that everyone knows, Man in a Box and fucking We Die Young, was it called? Yeah. Some classics on here. Worthy mention. Suicidal might be my favourite record of theirs. Again, a slightly more mature thing. A bit of funk creeping in. And you could hear where Infectious Grooves come from. And, of course, you've got Rob Trujillo, of now of Metallica fame. His first record with Suicidal, I want to say. Could be wrong, but I feel like it was. This is brilliant. Like I say, comfortably, my favourite Suicidal album. There's some gems on here. Particularly the opening track, You Can't Bring Me Down. Classic thrash with a great bit of Rocky George on guitar. Love this record. Worthy mention. Worthy mention for this. A lot of people's favourite Napalm Death record. It isn't my favourite, but it's right up there. I love what they did with... I mean, it's dripping in Morris sound. You can hear that they recorded it there. And that was the one thing that takes away from it. I think it loses a bit of that classic Napalm Death edge in the production. But it's magnificent. There's some fucking killer tunes on here. So, shout out to Harmony Corruption, Napalm Death. And, of course, shout out to this, that I imagine will be in a lot of people's top 6. It's great. It's brilliant. It's Dayside's best album. That doesn't quite make it, but it just goes to show what fucking stupendous quality there was out there in 1990. This is a breathtaking record and changed me and my mates' lives in a sense when it come out. It was just a brutal attack, evil, straight in your fucking face death metal at a fucking trillion miles an hour. Magnificent record. Now, there are others that I don't have physical media of, or certainly not to hand, that I need to mention. Cancer to the Gory End came out. Great album, not great. Celtic Frost, let's mention Vanity Nemesis. That was a 1990 record. But hit and miss, I will say. Death Angel, with, was it Act 3? Anyway, honourable mention, great. Drummer Brian of Green Sabre fucking loves it. Cannibal Corpse with their debut, Eaten Back to Life. Great little album. Daft as fuck. Some classic death metal on it, though. Honourable mention. Creator. Coma of Souls. No Extreme Aggression. Let's get that out there. Magnificent start. Decent enough A-side. Tails off to fuck for me, personally, does that album. Judas Priest, Painkiller. Absolutely magnificent record. There may be images inserted here. I'm rattling through them too quickly, so wait and see on that front. But Judas Priest, again, firing on all cylinders. A fucking magnificent record, Painkiller. And an honourable mention. Benedictions. Had an album out that's fucking name escapes me. Another cracker, but not top 6 quality. Iron Maiden, of course. Where the Wheels Fell Off for me. No Prayer for the Dying. But an honourable mention nonetheless. Who else? I feel like I've forgotten someone. I have no doubt forgotten something deadly important from 1990, and I'm sure in the comments below you will all tell me. But there's, of course, my glaring omission to come. And I don't have a physical media to show you, because I only ever own this on cassette. I don't think I ever had the CD, even, either. And my glaring omission for 1990 is this image inserted. Pantera's Cowboys from Hell. You could say a debut of sorts. It wasn't. They'd done that terrible covered fucking power metal or whatever it was called, which was their original debut and stuff. And I think Pantera would like you to have forgotten those first 2 records and start here. And that's kind of, it's certainly where I started with them. I mean, the track Cowboys from Hell, catchy as hell. Cemetery Gates, beautiful vocals, exquisite guitars. Psycho Holiday, I was never an enormous fan of. I felt it didn't really go anywhere and it just sort of laboured that riff for too long. Domination's a cracking track on there, and there are others that are great. The reason I've put it as my glaring omission is because, personally, for me, I'm not sure Pantera have aged particularly well. I still have a soft spot for Vulgar Display of Power, which is my favourite Pantera album. And I do quite like Far Beyond Driven. I think there's some really good fucking riffage on there. The reason that I've glaring omissioned it, as I think this album, Cowboys from Hell in particular, gets talked up in the annals of absolute classic, and it isn't for me. I'm not a fan of Phil Anselmo's fucking Rob Halford impression that he does throughout a lot of it. Not a huge fan of that. I'm not a huge fan of, don't get me wrong, Darryl, Dimebag, Diamond, whatever era of Darryl he was at the time, was a sensational guitarist. There is of that there is no denying. Sensational guitarist. I didn't overly like his tone though. I liked that chunk element that he created, and the groove that they created was unrivaled at the time. Yes, it has created a lot of bastard sons in the metal community since, and I think one of the things why I feel Pantera hasn't aged well is what it spawned. I'm not an enormous fan of that whole sort of groove metal thing that I think's aged really badly personally. And but this is just personally. There'll be people like just shaking their heads at this video. But the reason for Pantera's Cowboys from Hell being my glaring omission is because like I say, Vulgar Display of Power is all about that. When that come out, I thought, right, yeah, consistent, brilliant. There were only a couple of songs on the Primal Concrete Sledge worthy mention, best track on this one as well. There were only, it wasn't an album that I went back to anywhere near as much as Vulgar Display, and I think it's hyped up. I think it's overrated, and it's still definitely overrated. Now I know that the death of Darryl and Vinny will have played some part of that. Of course it will, but yeah, I just think it's my glaring omission because I think it's an album that gets hyped a little more than it deserves personally, so that's why it's my glaring omission. I have no doubt omitted loads of other classics that you're about to tell me about in the comments and so on and so forth. But that's it. Look, we're nearly at 35 minutes. I was trying to rein these fucking videos in, but yeah, so much for that. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you're enjoying this little sort of thread of vids that I'm doing on my decade of metal. Thanks so much as well for the trickle of competition entries from my previous one. If you've not seen that, go back in my video feed, my 200 subs competition. I'm at 221 currently, so that is mainly thanks to a few of you big hitters. I'm talking to you, Johnny Mac, Rock and Metal Plus, and you, Death Doom Metalhead Liam, and various others, Metal Marty Mark, and Blackened Hymns, and Cavernous Carnage, and there are others that my apologies if I failed to mention you that I've already put a competition entry in. But for those that have, thanks ever so much. That's the reason that I've had all these sort of additional subscriptions. I can't thank you guys enough, and it's great. I'm loving watching these competition vids. So yeah, keep them coming. Closes at the back end of this month, so did I say like the 27th or something? Anyway, whatever it is, Greenwich Mean Time, midnight, whatever. So yeah, thanks for watching this, thanks for watching that, thanks for entering that, thanks for liking and subscribing, and until the next video, which is likely to be 1991, I will bid you farewell. Take care, guys. See you later.